They say the bell only rings for those who've forgotten something important, and that if you follow it, you may remember something the waking world has made you forget. Take a deep breath, let your shoulders ease downward. Let your jaw relax, let your chest feel calm as it rises and falls. There is nothing expected of you. Now, no task to finish, no thought to chase, only the rhythm of your breath. And the story gently waiting to unfold. Our story begins at the edge of a quiet village, nestled in the green folds of old hills, where wildflowers grow freely in the grass and the stone paths are worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The village is small, its rooftops thatched with straw, and its walls washed in soft, earthy colors. Chimney smoke rises into the dusky sky like threads pulled from the seams of day and night. It is the hour when everything slows down, when soup simmers gently in clay pots and shutters creak closed for the evening, and it is at that hour, just as the sun slips behind the trees, that the sound comes. A single bell, low, warm, distant. It rings only once each evening, always from the same direction. Somewhere beyond the village road, through the woods, past what most people ever see, the children whisper stories about it. They say the bell belongs to a forgotten chapel, one that cannot be found by map or memory, only by those who feel something missing but don't yet know what it is tonight. A young girl named Elya stands at the far end of the village path. She is small and quiet, with steady eyes and a heart tuned gently to wonder. She has heard the bell before, many times, but tonight it feels different, nearer, fuller, like it brushed the inside of her chest and stirred something just beneath her ribs behind her. The village glows with candlelight windows, flicker voices hum low and warm. The sound of spoons against bowls and the soft clink of wooden latches fills the air. But ahead of her, the path lies open. It stretches forward in winding turns. Framed by leaning trees and slowly gathering mist, the air smells like moss and damp stone. With the faintest hint of rosemary from someone's kitchen garden, the bell is silent now. It always rings only once. But in Elya's heart, the sound continues, not as a noise, but as a gentle invitation. She takes a step forward, then another. Her feet move silently over the stones. A soft wind brushes her face somewhere overhead. Crow settles on a branch and tucks its head beneath its wing. She walks slowly, letting the hush of the evening surround her. Each step feels like a memory rising, a rhythm older than thought. A return to something she cannot name. She doesn't know where the road leads. No one who hears the bell ever does, but she trusts it. The sky above turns deeper blue one by one. Stars begin to appear between the leaves. They blink softly, as if watching her with patient, ancient eyes. Let your breath move gently now. Let your mind wander as Elya wanders. Let the rhythm of the road guide you softly. And the bell, though silent, continue to echo somewhere just ahead. The path is waiting, and the journey has begun. The path grew narrower as Elya walked, bordered on both sides by tall, quiet trees. They stood like gentle guardians, their branches bending slightly overhead as if to shelter her from the deepening dusk. A cool mist had begun to roll in, soft and low, brushing against her ankles and curling along the edges of the road. Like a shawl being drawn across the earth, Elya paused for a moment and looked back. The village was gone from view now, tucked behind the hill and swallowed by the thickening trees ahead. The forest opened wider. It was not dark. The last of the evening light lingered like pale silver on the leaves. Here and there, tiny points of gold blinked softly in the shadows at first. She thought they were stars then. She realized they moved lantern bugs, the old folk called them. Small winged insects that lit up the forest path in slow pulses of light. They floated lazily through the air. As if drifting in a dream, one landed briefly on her sleeve. Its glow a soft and steady hum. She smiled and held her arm still until it lifted away again and vanished into the quiet as she walked farther. She began to notice small things scattered beside the path. A ribbon tied gently to a tree root, a button nestled into a patch of moss, a wooden bead half buried in the soil. Each one looked carefully placed, as if left there with quiet purpose. They were old, but clean forgotten, but not abandoned. She knelt beside the ribbon. It was faded blue, tied in a loose knot with one trailing end that moved slightly in the breeze. She touched it and felt a soft warmth rise up through her fingertips, not from the ribbon itself, but from the moment, from the hush that surrounded it further along. She found a tiny bell, larger than a thimble, hanging from a low branch. It didn't ring. It simply swayed gently with the movement of the air. She reached out and steadied it with her fingers. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once and then fell silent. The forest was not empty. It was alive. But calm breathing slowly with her walking with her, she came to a fork in the path. One road curved down into a thicket of shadows. Thick with roots and stone, the other was barely more than a trail. Narrow and overgrown, but glowing faintly with lantern bugs that drifted in a loose line like stars falling to earth. Elya followed the light. The trail curved through an arch of ivy and dipped into a hollow where the mist grew deeper. It was not cold. It wrapped around her in a way that felt gentle. Like a memory you can almost hold but not quite. Name a few steps later, she saw it. A stone wall, broken in places but still standing beyond it. A gate made of wood and iron, heavy with vines but slightly open behind the gate. A small courtyard full of moss and moonlight, and at the center, the chapel. It was built of pale stone. Its roof rounded with age and covered in green. There was a bell tower, tall and slender, though the bell itself was hidden in shadow. Near the entrance, a candle burned in a glass holder, its flame steady despite the wind, as if someone had just been there, as if someone knew she was coming. Elya stood quietly and breathed in the air, smelled like old roses and damp earth, and something else, something warm and familiar. Like a story you once heard and nearly forgot, she stepped forward, and the gate creaked softly open. The chapel, though silent, welcomed her. Let your breathing stay soft now. Let your thoughts wander gently beside Elya's steps. The bell may not ring again tonight, but its echo carries on, leading her deeper into what waits to be remembered. The chapel door was carved with delicate patterns that had faded with time-curved lines. Curling leaves and a small symbol at the center that looked like an eye gently closed in sleep. Elya ran her fingers across the wood. Feeling the grooves beneath her touch, the door opened with barely a sound. Swinging inward on silent hinges inside, the air was cool and still. The walls were made of smooth stone. Pale gray and softened by age vines had crept in through cracks in the roof and windows. Weaving across the floor like slow-moving rivers of green tiny flowers bloomed in patches of moonlight. Glowing faintly where the light reached through the arched windows, there were no pews. Only stone benches along the sides of the room. And in the center stood a round platform with a single cushion resting upon it above. A rope hung down from the bell tower, old and frayed but still strong. Elya moved quietly to the center of the room. Her footsteps made no sound on the moss-covered floor. She sat gently on the cushion and looked up at the rope that connected her to the bell far above. No one had told her what to do. There were no instructions, no signs, no voices guiding her. But she felt something deep inside begin to calm, like a wave settling after a long journey. She closed her eyes in the silence. She could still hear the road behind her, the crickets, the soft bell from earlier. Even the voices of the village fading into evening, and under all of it, she heard something else. Not with her ears, but with a part of her that lived deeper than sound. A story it was not told in words, but in feeling a memory. Rising slowly like morning mist, she saw a child walking the same path she had walked, not herself, someone else. A boy, much older now, but still carrying the same quiet wonder. She saw the same ribbon tied to the tree, the same tiny bell, the same glowing insects lighting the way. She saw the chapel. Newer then, its walls not yet cracked, its garden still trimmed. And she saw the bell being hung. Lifted carefully by gentle hands, not to mark time, but to mark love, to call the forgotten home. To help the lost remember. The vision faded gently like a leaf falling into water, and Elya opened her eyes. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. She was not alone here. This was not just a building, it was a memory held in stone, a story waiting to be heard. And now that she had heard it, she felt it would always be with her. She stood slowly and walked toward one of the arched windows outside. The forest was still and glowing, the mist had thinned. The lantern bugs hovered near the trees like sleepy stars. She placed her hand on the window ledge and whispered a thank you. To the chapel, to the path, to the quiet bell that had called her here. Then she turned and made her way back toward the door. The night was waiting for her. The road would guide her home. Let your breath remain slow and soft now. Let your body grow heavier and your thoughts lighter like Elya. You may not know where the path leads, but you are safe within it, and whatever waits at the end will be gentle. As Elya stepped back through the doorway of the chapel, the cool night air welcomed her like an old friend. The soft candle by the entrance flickered once, then steadied, as if nodding her onward. She paused on the mossy stones just outside the threshold. Glancing back one last time, the chapel stood in silence, still and peaceful, as if holding its breath with her. She began walking again, past the gate, along the winding path where mist coiled gently like sleepy cats around her ankles. The forest was quieter. Now, the owl from before no longer called, even the wind had softened into a breeze. So still it barely moved the leaves. Elya let her fingers drift along the ivy that clung to the old wall, feeling the cool texture of each leaf. She moved slowly, without hurry, and yet the air around her seemed to shift with each step. The lantern bugs followed loosely at a distance, flickering behind her in warm pulses, casting golden shadows on the trunks of trees ahead. The road dipped slightly and curved beneath a low archway of knotted branches as she crossed under it. She noticed something new. A faint glow in the trees to her left, not from insects this time, but from a single window tucked into the side of a tree trunk. It was a round window, made of thick glass, warm light glowing behind it like a golden breath, curious. She stepped closer and soon saw a tiny wooden door beneath the window, shaped like an arch and surrounded by roots. The door creaked softly open before she could even touch it, and from within stepped a figure no taller than her waist, an old woman, with kind eyes and a robe made of bark, moss, and silk threads. She smiled without speaking and motioned for Elya to come closer. Elya did not feel fear, only the quiet comfort that comes when something unknown feels somehow familiar. The small woman, who seemed as old as the forest itself, reached into her robe and pulled out a bundle wrapped in linen. She handed it to Elya with both hands. As though offering something sacred, Elya accepted it gently, and opened the folds. Inside was a bell, tiny and smooth, made from stone instead of metal. Its surface was warm and carved with the same pattern she had seen on the chapel door. A single closed eye, she looked up at the woman, who nodded once, then pointed toward the path behind her. No words were spoken, but Elya understood she was meant to carry it, not to ring it, but to keep it. The bell was not for sound, it was for remembering. She bowed her head softly in thanks, and placed the stone bell carefully in the pouch tied to her belt. When she looked up again, the woman had returned to the little tree house, and the door had closed. Elya stood still for a moment, watching the glow of the round window fade to a faint shimmer. Then she turned back to the road, her heart full and quiet. She walked on, guided now not by sound, but by feeling the bell beside her, the chapel behind her, and the long path ahead. Let your breath move gently again. Let your hands relax. Let your chest rise and fall, like the trees swaying above Elya's head. The world she walks through may be different from yours, but the stillness is the same. Let it wrap around you like the moss wraps around the stones. Let it hold you until sleep finds you. The path led Elya out of the forest and into a wide open field covered in tall grass that swayed gently in the moonlight. The grass was pale gold, almost silver now under the soft sky, and it moved in slow waves like the surface of a quiet sea. Elya paused at the edge of the field, letting the breeze touch her face and carry the scent of wild thyme and warm soil. In the distance, small hills rolled like sleeping forms under a blanket. Fireflies danced lazily through the air, blinking in no hurry, their light soft and slow. A stream cut across the middle of the field, its banks lined with smooth stones that shimmered in the starlight. Elya moved forward, each step making only the faintest rustle as her boots brushed the grass. There was no sound of people, no distant voices, no bells. Now only the gentle hush of the wind and the quiet song of the earth beneath her as she walked. She passed standing stones tall and smooth, shaped by time and set deep into the earth. Each one had symbols carved into it. Not words, but marks, like those she had seen before. Closed eyes, spirals, and lines that curved like rivers. She stopped beside one of the stones and reached out to touch it. The surface was cool and rough, but beneath her hand she felt a soft vibration. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in the stone. She leaned closer and closed her eyes, and for just a moment, she felt something stir within her mind. a memory not her own. A pair of hands planting the stone, voices chanting low. The ringing of a bell carried on wind older than any name. She opened her eyes slowly and stepped back. The vibration faded. The night returned to stillness. The field had become even quieter now, and the air felt heavier, like a hush before snowfall up ahead. Near the edge of the stream, she saw something strange, a bench made of stone. Resting beneath an old tree with bark as white as bone, its branches stretched wide and low, covered in pale leaves that barely moved. It looked like a place where time stopped. Elya walked toward it, her steps slow and steady. She sat gently on the bench, feeling its coolness through her clothes from here. She could see the entire field, the hills, the stream, the path disappearing behind her. She placed the stone bell on her lap and traced her fingers along its carved lines, though it made no sound. She felt as if it spoke to her, not in words, but in the stillness between thoughts, a quiet knowing. Calm and deep above, the stars shifted not quickly, not suddenly, just enough to be noticed if you were still and paying attention. And Elya was still very still. Her breath moved softly in and out. Her hands rested gently on her knees, her eyes watched the stars, but her thoughts floated free. There was no hurry. The bell had led her here, and whatever waited beyond this field would arrive in its own time. Let your body settle now. Let your shoulders grow heavy. Let the silence of the field hold you like a blanket. You are here beside Elya, not walking anymore, just resting. Let that rest carry you where you need to go. Elya sat beneath the pale tree, her eyes half closed, her thoughts drifting like leaves in slow-moving water. The white bark behind her was smooth and warm, and when she leaned back against it, it felt alive, not pulsing or speaking, but aware. As if it had stood for so long that it no longer needed to move to be present, the air around the tree was still. The wind had calmed, the fireflies had floated away, and even the crickets had gone quiet. Everything here seemed to exist inside a breath. Held just before sleep, she rested the stone bell on the bench beside her and watched the soft glow of the stars reflect in the curve of the stream. It sparkled like a silver ribbon unwinding in the grass. The sound of the water was quiet and clear, like whispers passing through smooth stones. Then something changed, very gently. The tree behind her released a sound. It was not a voice or a word. It was the soft tone of wood creaking. Like a door opening in a house that has always been there, but never seen, Elya turned to look up at the branches among the leaves. It was not solid, not quite light, but somewhere in between a figure, shaped like a person, but flowing like mist. Stepped slowly down the branch, it moved without sound. Landing beside her with the grace of falling snow, the figure wore a robe that shimmered faintly. Made from threads of moonlight and shadow, its face was gentle and calm, not smiling, not stern, but endlessly peaceful. The figure reached down and touched the stone bell. Its hand passed over it once, and the bell shimmered softly, though it made no sound. Then the figure looked at Elya. "You carry memory," it said, though not with words. Its meaning reached her like warmth through water. You listened to silence and followed stillness. You remembered what others forgot. Elya nodded, though she wasn't sure why she felt no fear. Only deep stillness. Like the space between two waves, the figure extended its hand. She took it. It was light as air, but it held her with certainty together. They stepped forward from the bench and stood at the edge of the stream. The water was so clear that it reflected not just their shapes, but something deeper, glimpses of places. Elya had never been, but somehow knew a stone bridge overgrown with moss. A staircase spiraling downward into candlelight, a garden of bells that bloomed once every 100 years. The figure pointed to the reflection of the garden. "It is not time yet." The meaning said, "But you will return, and when you do, the bell will know you then." The figure stepped back into the roots of the white tree. Its shape dissolved into the bark like ink fading into paper. The sound of the stream rose gently again. The fireflies returned to the air, and the wind began to move through the tall grass once more. Elya stood alone again, but she felt no sorrow, only fullness. Like a cup filled completely and set carefully beside a fire, she picked up the bell. Now slightly warmer in her hand, she looked toward the path that continued across the stream and into the far hills. It was time to keep walking. Let your breath be soft and steady. Let your limbs relax where they lie, like Elya. You have touched stillness, and in that stillness, you are safe. Elya stepped lightly across the smooth stones that lined the stream's edge. The water rippled gently around her ankles, cool and welcoming, as if recognizing her presence and allowing her to pass. Each stone she stepped on felt solid and placed with care, as though someone long ago had walked this way and left behind a trail only the heart could follow. On the other side, the path rose slightly, weaving between boulders covered in lichen and moss. They stood like resting giants. Quiet and strong, their curved shapes softened by time and rain, birdsong had returned to the air slow. Sleepy notes carried on a mild wind that swirled gently through the grass. Elya climbed slowly, her breath steady, the stone bell tucked securely at her side. The sky had turned darker now, but the stars grew brighter, and their reflections shimmered on every wet leaf and smooth rock. They seemed to hum without sound. A steady presence above her that pulsed in time with her steps. As she moved further up the path, she came upon a ring of standing stones wider and taller than those in the field. These stones bore carvings so old they were nearly worn, smooth. She walked between them with quiet reverence, her hand brushing lightly against the closest one. It was warm and beneath her palm. She felt a steady rhythm, not a heartbeat, but the slow pulse of something older. In the center of the ring stood a tree stump, wide and flat, as if made to hold something. She placed the bell gently in its center for a moment. The world held still. Then, from somewhere above, a wind gathered, not cold or harsh, but clean. Like the air just before dawn, it circled the stones, lifting the small leaves on the ground and carrying the scent of mint and cedar. The carvings on the stones began to glow faintly, not with light, but with memory. Each mark told a piece of a story, a journey across unknown lands, a face seen once and never forgotten. A promise whispered under a twilight sky. Elya closed her eyes and let the wind touch her cheeks. She didn't need to understand every symbol. She only needed to listen. The bell did not ring, but she felt it speak, a gentle reminder, a promise of return. She opened her eyes and lifted it once more. It had grown slightly warmer, smoother in her hands, like something alive. She turned from the stone circle and followed the path as it began to level out ahead. The hills parted slightly to reveal a narrow valley bathed in starlight. It stretched wide and soft, with tall grass that shimmered silver and distant lights flickering like lanterns on the wind. And in the center of that valley stood a single tree, different from the one before. This tree was taller, broader, with deep green leaves that whispered even when the wind was still. It called to her not with sound, but with welcome, with the feeling of coming home. Let your breath follow Elya's, now slow, steady. Open, you are walking beside her. You are safe in this valley, and the night is holding you gently. Elya moved softly through the valley, the grass brushing against her legs in quiet waves. Each step was slow and deliberate, not out of fear, but out of respect. The air was still, yet full thick with quiet presence. Like the moment just before a story is told, the tree in the center stood tall and wide, its bark dark and ridged like folded cloth, its roots sprawling gently over the ground. There was no change in sound, no sudden light, only a deep peace that invited her forward. She stepped beneath its canopy and felt the world shift. The night sounds dulled, the coolness of the air wrapped around her like a soft cloak, and the feeling of being watched faded not, because the gaze had vanished. Beneath the branches, a circle of stones was set into the earth in the center. A bowl made of polished wood rested atop a carved pedestal. It was filled with water so still that it reflected the stars perfectly. Even though the surface was shaded, Elya knelt beside it. She leaned over and gazed into the water, and as she did, her reflection shifted. She saw herself walking, carrying the bell. She saw herself younger, listening to the first distant chime from her window as a child. She saw herself older, standing at a cliff's edge with wind rushing through her hair. Holding the same bell in her hand, the tree was showing her not what was, or what would be, but what was remembered, what was carried in quiet places of the heart. A single leaf drifted down and landed beside her on the moss. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. No need to speak, no need to move. Let your body grow soft now. Let your thoughts curl like roots into warm soil. You are beneath the tree. You are held. And all that you need to remember is already with you. Time passed gently beneath the tree. Elya didn't know how long she had been resting, but her body felt weightless. Her mind, as quiet as the sky above the hum, had faded into silence. And even her thoughts had softened into a hush. She opened her eyes slowly. Blinking in the gentle light that filtered through the leaves, the air was warmer now. Not from the sun, but from the stillness itself. She looked down at the grass and noticed a pattern beneath her feet, the roots of the tree, thick and sprawling, curved in slow spirals. And at the center of those spirals was a small stone circle flat, mossy and worn smooth like a threshold. Elya stood and stepped closer. The center stone was darker than the rest. With a faint line carved across it, she knelt and traced the line with her fingers. To her surprise, it moved. The line widened, revealing a seam. And before she could wonder further, the stone shifted. A soft click, then silence again. Slowly, a round hatch lifted open beneath it. Stairs spiraled downward into soft golden light. The air that rose from the opening was cool and sweet, like herbs crushed in spring water. Elya looked around once more. The valley remained still. The stars above continued their watch. The tree stood, as it had for ages, unmoving, yet alive, with the bell tucked safely at her side and the marked leaf pressed against her heart. She stepped down into the stairwell. The walls were smooth stone, carved in gentle curves. Small lanterns hung from hooks, each with a flame that burned low and steady, casting shadows that swayed slowly across the walls. She descended without fear. The air was quiet, not empty, but respectful, like a place built to be listened to at the bottom of the stairs. The tunnel opened into a round chamber, its ceiling arched above like the inside of a bell. The walls were lined with niches, and in each one rested an object small and simple, like the ones she had seen along the forest path. A thimble, a wooden spoon, a folded piece of cloth, a feather. Each was placed carefully, gently, as if it had a name, a purpose, a memory. Elya walked slowly past them. She didn't touch anything, but she felt their presence, felt the way they held stories without needing to speak them. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. Not tall, just high enough to rest something upon. It was shaped like the trunk of a tree, and its top was carved in the familiar pattern. The eye closed in restful knowing. She reached into her pouch and lifted the stone bell. It felt warm now, steady in her hand, no longer just an object, but a part of the journey itself. She placed it gently on the pedestal for a moment. Nothing moved. Then the chamber sighed. A breeze that came from nowhere lifted gently through the space. The lanterns flickered but did not go out, and the bell, without being touched, gave a single clear tone. Soft, low, true. It rang not through her ears, but through her body, through the chamber. Through the stone beneath her feet it rang in her memory, and then faded. She stood still, eyes closed, hands resting at her sides. Let your breath follow hers now. Let your body be still in this quiet room. You are standing in the center of memory, and the sound that rang is still echoing in your dreams. After the bell's tone faded into silence, the chamber around Elya grew still once more. She stood there quietly, her hands at her sides, her gaze resting on the small bell resting on the pedestal, though the sound had long disappeared. She could still feel its presence inside her, gentle and calm, like the afterglow of a kind word spoken in the dark. Then, just beyond the far wall, she heard a soft shifting, a sliding of stone. A whisper of air, a section of the chamber opened inward, revealing a narrow passage, dimly lit and lined with shelves carved directly into the stone. Elya stepped forward slowly, her footfalls echoing gently against the walls, her fingers brushing the edges of the ancient doorway. Inside, the tunnel widened into a circular room filled with curved rows of shelves. But these shelves did not hold books instead. They were filled with tiny objects carefully arranged, each sitting alone in its space, like a story waiting to be heard. There were rings made of twine, pebbles carved with tiny marks, bundles of thread tied in knots, scraps of parchment with single words. This was no ordinary library. It was a collection of memories held in shape, held in stillness. Elya moved through the room in silence as she walked past the items. Her thoughts began to drift, her mind opening like a window. Each object seemed to carry a whisper, not a voice, but a feeling. The thread spoke of a promise made in spring, the carved pebble recalled the rhythm of footsteps on an old bridge. The parchment remembered a lullaby hummed by candlelight. Elya's eyes softened. She understood now this was where the bell had led her, not just to a chapel, or a tree, or a field, but to a place where memories were kept, where silence was not emptiness, but fullness. She sat down on a low stone bench in the center of the library. Above her, the ceiling curved into a soft dome painted with stars, tiny pinpricks of gold that glowed faintly even in the dark. They looked just like the sky outside. And for a moment, she felt as though she were floating far above the ground. Her breath slowed. She leaned back and let her head rest against the cool stone. Everything felt lighter now. The question she had carried with her, the mystery of the bell, the path, the figure beneath the tree, no longer needed answers. They had become part of the stillness. She closed her eyes, and in that moment, she wasn't just remembering, she was remembered by the objects, by the tree, by the road, by the bell. Let your eyes grow heavy now. Let your breath match the quiet hum of this place. You are in a library of echoes, and each thought, each dream, each sigh you've ever released into the night still exists here, soft, safe, and forever held. Elya stayed in the library for a long time. Though time itself seemed to bend and stretch within those walls, there was no urgency. No passing of hours, only the steady comfort of being still. The glow of the star-painted ceiling above her pulsed faintly, as if breathing in time with the earth. She opened her eyes slowly and looked once more at the shelves of quiet artifacts. Each one seemed to hum with its own rhythm, tiny heartbeats of old moments still alive in memory. She rose gently from the bench and moved again through the round room, her fingers lightly tracing the air near each item. Then, near the far edge of the library, she noticed a narrow stairway curling upward behind a heavy curtain of vines. She approached it quietly, parting the vines like she might pull back a soft blanket. The steps beyond were made of dark wood and polished by age, their grain glowing faintly under her bare feet. She climbed slowly, her hand trailing along the smooth wall beside her. At the top of the stairs was a single wooden door, no handle, no keyhole, just a soft indent where her hands seemed to fit perfectly. She pressed her palm into the wood. The door opened soundlessly inside. The room was small and round, lit by a single candle resting on a brass dish. At the center of a wide table behind it sat a figure robed in deep blue, face hidden beneath a long hood. The flickering candlelight danced across the surface of the walls, which were covered not with shelves or books but with handprints, hundreds of them, small and large, etched gently into the stone like soft waves across sand. Elya stepped forward without fear. The robed figure looked up, and though she could not see their eyes, she felt them not watching but recognizing. "You have carried the sound well," the figure said, not aloud, but within her its meaning arrived in her chest like warmth from firelight. The bell is not for calling, it is for guiding, for finding the path when no path can be seen. Elya nodded slowly. She understood now why the sound had found her, why her steps had led here, and why the silence along the way had never felt lonely. The figure reached out a gloved hand and held out a small object. It was a candle, thin and wrapped in dried lavender stems, tied with a silver thread. "This is for you," the guardian said, not to light the way, but to remind you that even in darkness you carry light. Elya accepted the candle with both hands. Holding it close, it smelled of fields in early summer, of calm winds and quiet evenings when the world folds into sleep. The guardian gestured toward a stone basin in the corner of the room. Elya walked to it slowly. Holding the candle as she peered inside, it was filled with water like glass. On its surface, her reflection wavered not alone, but surrounded by soft silhouettes, the tree, the chapel, the glowing bugs, the ancient stones. They had always been there, and now they would always remain with her. She turned to the guardian and bowed her head once. Deeply, then stepped quietly back through the doorway. Candle in hand, let your breath slow like the flame on the table. Let your shoulders soften as Elya's did. You are carrying a candle too now, and even in sleep its glow will stay with you. Elya descended the stairs with the lavender-wrapped candle held gently between her palms. Each step felt slower than the last, not from weariness, but from the quiet weight of peace resting on her shoulders. The hush of the underground library remained behind her, humming softly like a memory stored safely in a heart-shaped box. When she stepped through the last doorway, the night greeted her once again. The stars above blinked kindly, and the soft wind returned to brush her cheeks like a familiar lullaby. The valley was exactly as she had left it. The tall grass, shimmering like threads of silk, and the ancient tree standing patiently in the center. But something had shifted, not in the world. In her, Elya looked down at the candle. Its scent still lingered, sweetly lavender and something older, a trace of pine. A breath of stone, the kind of smell that feels like childhood stories and distant laughter. She walked softly through the field. Retracing her steps without needing to think, the stream ahead glistened under the moonlight. She crossed it slowly, her reflection dancing beneath her feet, the ripples moving outward like the quiet spreading of understanding. The path beyond the water now felt familiar. The ring of carved stones, the slope between the sleeping hills, the hush of the old forest rising ahead. As she passed the stones once more, she paused to place her hand against one of them. It no longer pulsed with vibration. Instead, it welcomed her with stillness, like an old friend who doesn't need to speak to be heard. She moved into the trees, the forest welcoming her with open arms. The mist had lifted, and the fireflies had returned, flickering near the branches in soft spirals. Lighting the trail without need for flame, she walked gently, the candle cradled in her hands, the stone bell tucked safely by her side. She felt the presence of the little wooden door in the tree she had seen before. But she did not stop this time. Some places are meant to be visited only once, and remembered forever. As she neared the edge of the woods, the silhouette of the village rooftops emerged ahead. Smoke curled slowly from chimneys. A dog barked once in the distance, and windows glowed with the golden hush of bedtime. The sky had shifted into the soft blue before dawn. The stars faded gently, one by one, like sleepy eyes closing. Elya paused at the final bend in the path. She turned back to look at the road behind her. The forest, the valley, the bell, all still there, but now carried with her. Tucked gently into the folds of her breath and the steady beat of her steps, she looked down at the candle once more. It hadn't burned in yet. It had changed something within her. She would not light it. Not yet. Its glow had already done what it came to do. As she took the last few steps toward home, her chest felt light, her hands steady, her mind clear. And when she opened the little wooden gate at the edge of her cottage yard, the bell at her side gave a soft, silent chime, not one heard by ears, but one felt in the space just behind the heart. The place where dreams begin. Let your breath settle now. Let your body sink into the softness of where you rest. The path is complete, and the candle glows quietly inside you. Inside her quiet cottage, Elya stepped through the wooden door and into the soft hush of home. The room was still dim, the embers in the hearth glowing a gentle orange, breathing warmth into the floorboards and walls. She set the lavender candle down on the windowsill where the fading stars could see it. The cottage was small but full of calm, a single chair near the fire, a quilt folded neatly across her bed, wooden shelves lined with dried herbs, and tiny bundles of sage and thyme. Elya moved slowly through the space, every motion as easy and natural as a leaf falling through still air. She removed her shoes and let her feet rest on the smooth floor. She let her fingers brush over the fabric of the quilt, the familiar scent of sun-dried cotton rising from it. She sat at the edge of the bed and untied the pouch at her side. The stone bell slid into her pomacool, smooth, unchanged in shape. But somehow different now. It was lighter, maybe. She placed it carefully in the small wooden box beside her bed, on top of a folded piece of soft cloth that rested there like a dream waiting to be returned to. She looked out the window. The stars had all but vanished now, the sky turning the pale color of milk in morning. The village beyond her cottage was still. A single rooster crowed in the distance, gentle and far away, but she was not ready to rise, not yet. She lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over her. The weight of it comforting and familiar, the pillow beneath her head smelled faintly of lavender from the candle. From the valley, or maybe it had always smelled this way. She turned her head slightly and looked at the candle once more. It had not been lit, but it had burned within her all the same. She closed her eyes. Her breath moved like wind through tall grass and out soft and slow in the space behind her eyes. The journey lingered, the forest, the bell tower, the tree, the guardian, each place folding gently into the next, like pages in a story told without words. And then she saw them all again, not as places to return to, but as parts of herself, the sound that guided her, the silence that steadied her, the symbols that reminded her to listen. Let your breathing match Elya's now. Let your arms rest beside you. Let your eyelids grow heavy with stars. You are in your own cottage, on your own path, and the bell that called to Elya now calls to you, not to wake you, but to keep you safe as you drift. Sleep now held by the quilt of memory, watched by the hush of ancient trees, and cradled by the bell that rings only in dreams. The morning light crept softly through the lace-curtained window, painting the floor in quiet gold dust motes swirled gently in the beam. Dancing in slow spirals like memories floating just out of reach, Elya did not stir beneath the quilt, her breath steady. Her body curled softly like a cat in a sunbeam outside. The world awakened with tender footsteps. Birdsong threaded through the trees. A kettle whistled faintly in a neighbor's home. Footsteps padded gently across cobbled stones. But inside Elya's cottage, time moved differently. It did not pull or hurry, it stretched out, calm and wide, like a field in early spring. She dreamed not of dragons or storms or wild tales, but of bells that hung from branches, of rooms carved into hillsides, of words spoken only in silence. In her dream, the stone bell rested on a table before her. It glowed faintly, not with light, but with memory. She lifted it once more, and this time it rang not aloud, but in her chest, a note that sang through her ribs and wrapped gently around her spine like a lullaby. Then she was walking again, but not as a girl, as something older, wiser. She wore a cloak made of night wind and soft moss, her steps leaving behind small blossoms where her feet touched the path. She passed through places she had never seen, but somehow knew: a meadow of floating petals, a stream that sang stories through its current, an orchard where time hung ripe in the branches, waiting for someone gentle enough to pluck at each step, took her deeper into the hush. And with every place she touched, the bell inside her chest chimed once soft. Clear, true, she was not collecting stories now, she was becoming one. When she reached the hill at the end of the path, the wind stilled. Before her stood a stone arch, half buried in flowering vines. Carved above it, in a language that needed no words, were the symbols she had come to know: the spiral, the feather, and the closed eye. She passed through the arch and into a wide glade of stillness, and in the center, hanging from a branch by silver thread, was a bell the same as hers, but older, worn smooth by centuries of remembering. She approached it slowly, and as she reached out her hand, the two bells, hers and the one before her, began to hum in unison, a sound not of metal, but of earth, of rain on old roofs, of lullabies sung beside dying fires. And then she heard voices not speaking to her, but welcoming her home. The hush deepened and the glade faded. Elya exhaled gently in her sleep, a smile barely forming at the corner of her mouth. The morning outside grew brighter, but inside she remained wrapped in soft dreams. The candle on her windowsill glowed faintly, though no flame touched it. The bell in the wooden box lay still, but the air around it shimmered quietly, as if remembering: let your breath settle again. Let your mind return to the glade, to the path, to the bell that never needed to ring aloud. You are not alone. The hush knows your name, and the bell, in its silence, still listens for your dreams. As the village day began to unfold, doors creaking open, children's laughter, rising like soft bird-song, Elya remained asleep. Tucked gently into the folds of her quilt, no dream now pulled her deeply, only stillness. A resting of the spirit, the kind of sleep that follows a long walk home outside her window. A pair of sparrows perched on the sill, chirping softly to one another. The candle beside them remained unlit, yet it seemed to warm the air around it, and just below, inside the wooden box. The stone bell rested like a sealed letter, its message already delivered in time. Elya would rise, she would pour water into a small clay cup, sip slowly, and step barefoot into the morning sun. She would tend to her garden, lavender, thyme, and rosemary, all in neat little rows. She would hum softly, not remembering the tune, but carrying it anyway, and when neighbors passed by, she would smile. She would greet them gently, and in her eyes they would notice something, a kind of depthy look of someone who had walked further than most. Not in miles, but in meaning. They might not know of the forest, the tree, the guardian, the library of echoes, but they would feel it somehow in her presence, in the way she listened, in the way her silences were never empty. Children in the village would sometimes ask about the bell on her windowsill. They'd peer up at it, small faces wide with wonder. Does it ring? They would whisper, and Elya would kneel beside them, smile gently, and answer, only when you're listening very, very closely. At night, she'd place the bell beside her bed, not because she needed it anymore, but because it was part of her now sometimes. In the moments between sleep and waking, she would hear a soft chime, not in the room, but in her chest. It was the bell's way of saying, you are still on the path, and so. Her days passed, slow and rich, woven with simplicity, laced with memory. The tree still stood beyond the valley. The hidden library still waited in silence, and somewhere deep in a field of tall silver grass, a new traveler had begun to walk, led by a sound not quite heard, but always felt, because once the bell rings for you, even just once, it never truly stops. Let your body rest now in that knowing. Let your breath rise and fall with the rhythm of distant chimes. You have walked a quiet road tonight. You have followed silence and found it waiting with open arms. Sleep now with the bell beside you and the hush holding you close. Far beyond Elya's cottage, over soft hills and winding roads, in a village forgotten by most maps, an old bell maker stirred in his workshop. The room smelled of warm brass and aged wood, of dust and candle soot, of time itself settled into every crack and corner. He wore a cloak the color of smoke and earth, and his hands, though wrinkled, moved with the grace of memory. On the wall behind him hung bells of every shape and size, round and narrow, tall and wide, some carved with vines, others plain as river stone, but one spot on the wall was empty, a space where a bell had once hung. Long ago the old man looked at it now, not with sadness, but with a quiet kind of pride. He turned slowly to his bench, where an unfinished bell rested in a bed of velvet. Its shape was small, simple, but inside, etched carefully into its heart, was the symbol of the closed eye. The bellmaker touched it gently, and the metal hummed not, a sound in the air, but a vibration through his fingers. He smiled. He remembered the one who had taken the other bell, a girl with quiet footsteps and a listening heart. She had not known she was being chosen, but she had heard the call now. It was nearly time for another. He reached for a small wooden box tucked beneath the work table. Inside it lay a handful of leaves each, one shaped like the one Elya had carried, each one marked with a soft spiral drawn in ink made from crushed herbs. He selected one leaf and placed it beside the bell, then lit a thin candle, the flame dancing with a soft pop before settling into a steady glow. As the wax began to melt, he leaned close and whispered into the warm air. A name, a place, a moment not yet past. The bell beside him shimmered. Once, twice, then stilled outside the window of his shop. The wind began to rise. It curled gently through the grass, tugged at the edges of rooftops, and swept toward the far hills, where another child, not yet dreaming, stirred in her sleep. She would wake one day soon. She would hear something not loud, not sharp, but true, a sound in her chest that made her pause mid-step, a hush that wrapped around her ears like a song heard once and never forgotten. And when she followed it, when her feet touched the old stones, the bell would be waiting, because the bell never calls by accident. and those who hear it are never the same. Let your thoughts drift now. Like wind curling past the bellmaker's door, let your breath deepen as you rest in the knowledge that somewhere across time and silence, a story waits for you to sleep, wrapped in the sound that is not a sound, a whisper not spoken but always heard. Back in Elya's cottage, dawn brushed against the edges of her windows like a soft hand on a sleeping brow. But she did not wake, not yet. For her dreaming had not ended, it had only changed form in her sleep. She wandered a place between places, not quite memory, not quite vision, a quiet glade where the sky was neither night nor day, where everything glowed with the soft hue of possibility. She walked barefoot along a ribbon of moss that wound through tall grass. The air was filled with the scent of rosemary and rain, and all around her threads of golden light drifted lazily in the breeze, weightless, shimmering. Live, each thread was a story, a thought not yet spoken, a memory not quite forgotten. They curled gently through the air, never tangling, never rushing, just floating, as if waiting for a listener. Elya paused at a small wooden bridge that arched over a brook of clear silver water as she stepped onto the bridge. The wood beneath her feet hummed softly, not a sound of wood or water but of welcome below her. In the stream, reflections moved slowly, but they were not hers, they were moments. A hand reaching for another, a child listening to a distant bell, a stranger pausing in a forest clearing.
No.
Heart quiet and open, she leaned over the railing and watched the images pass. She didn't know the names of the people, didn't know when or where their lives unfolded, but she knew them because all those who hear the bell, all those who walk the path, are connected. A soft rustling came from behind her. She turned and saw a figure approaching across the moss. It was cloaked in gray, its hood pulled low, but from the way it moved, from the quiet reverence in each step, Elya understood who it was. The guardian from the tree, no longer a silent watcher, but a presence that had followed her through memory, through journey, through dream. The figure stopped beside her. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. The guardian reached into its robe and pulled forth a thread of golden light. It placed the thread into Elya's hands, and she felt it pulse gently in her palm. Not magic, not power, just a reminder. A reminder that each of us carries something unseen, a thread between moments, between hearts, between the waking and the dreaming. She bowed her head, and when she looked up, the figure was gone, but the thread remained. She tied it gently around her wrist. The knot formed easily, so the thread had always known how to hold. The wind stirred again, and the glade faded into the gentle hush of morning in her bed. Elya stirred. The light through her window warmed her cheek. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment she did not move, only breathed. And then she noticed the thread around her wrist, still glowing softly. Let your breath follow hers now. Let your body remain still in this crossing between dreams and waking, the thread between your thoughts. Nice. Your memories and your rest is strong, and you, like Elya, carry something precious, something no one else can see, but all will feel. Sleep again if you wish, or let the morning gently hold you. The bell will chime again when the time is right. The sun was climbing now, casting golden threads across the thatched rooftops of the village. But Elya, though awake, remained in bed a while longer. Her eyes were open. Yet her thoughts drifted gently still, floating among echoes of the dream. The bell, the quiet guardian. She finally rose. Slowly, as if not to wake the silence that still lingered around her outside, the garden waited. She stepped barefoot into the soft dew-kissed grass, her fingers trailing through the lavender she had planted seasons ago. The morning air was rich with scent, blooming time, warming soil, and the faintest trace of something older, music not heard with the ears. But with the chest beyond the garden gate stood a grove of trees she had never noticed before. Drawn by quiet curiosity, Elya followed the winding stone path between the hedges, and as she reached the edge of the grove, she paused there, hidden behind layers of ivy. It was a narrow wooden arch, not grand, not worn, just there waiting, carved into the arch's beam, was the feather symbol again. Soft and simple, she stepped through. What opened before her was not just a clearing, it was a garden, but not her own. It was wild vines curling in gentle spirals, trees blooming out of seasoned petals, falling upward instead of down and in the center. On weathered benches and mossy stones, were dozens of small wooden chimes, not bells this time, but hollow reeds and carved shells strung with silk. They moved without wind. Soft tones drifted through the air, short, delicate, like the start of lullabies forgotten before they were sung. Elya wandered gently through them. Each step brought a new note. Each note tugged softly at her memory. One made her think of holding hands for the first time. Another of a story her grandmother told by candlelight. Another of laughing in the rain as a child, soaked and joyful. This was the garden of forgotten songs, a place where all unspoken melodies went to rest, not lost, just waiting for someone to remember. She sat upon a stone bench, the chimes singing softly around her. She didn't need to hum, didn't need to play. The song was already there in the wind. In her breath, in her heartbeat, she closed her eyes and let it rise inside her. A soundless tune that wrapped around her like a quilt. She didn't need to name it, only to feel it, and somewhere far away, a child she'd never meet smiled in their sleep, because the song she remembered had once been sung to them by someone who had once heard the bell. Let your body sway gently. Now with the chimes, let your memories hum like soft wind through the garden. You, too, carry forgotten songs. Let them rise within you, and let them rest sleep. If you wish for, the garden will always be here, and the songs will always know your name. After some time in the garden of forgotten songs, Elya stood quietly and looked toward the farthest tree. It stood taller than the rest, its bark a deep silver gray, and its branches arched wide like the open arms of an old friend. Nestled at its base was a door, round and wooden, with no handle, only a smooth stone pressed into its center. Elya approached with care, her feet silent against the mossy floor. The stone in the door glowed faintly. As she neared, she placed her palm against it, and with a soft sigh, the door opened inward inside. The world shifted again. It was darker, but not cold. The room before her was circular, with high shelves reaching upward into shadow. No books lined these walls, only hourglasses, hundreds of them. Tall ones, small ones, some with fine white sand, others with deep red grains, shimmering gold. The hourglasses ticked silently. They turned themselves slowly, one after another, as if the very air inside the room moved with time. At the center of the chamber sat a figure in stillness, clothed in robes the color of twilight. Their hair was long and silver, falling over their shoulders like moonlight on a river. Their eyes were closed, but their presence filled the room. Elya did not speak. She stepped forward and sat cross-legged before the figure. As though she had always known to do so, the figures slowly opened their eyes. They were deep and quiet, like wells that had never gone dry. They looked at Elya not with questions, but with understanding. "You've come to the place where time rests," the figure said gently. "The bell does not ring here, it listens." Elya nodded slowly. She could feel it in her chest. The bell, the thread, the song, all still within her, all present here, too. The keeper of the still hours extended a hand, and in their palm was a tiny hourglass, no taller than a fingertip. The sand inside it was silver and moved not downward, but upward, suspended between then and now. "This is your moment," they whispered. "Not a second, not a span. A space. A breath in time that belongs only to you." Elya reached out and accepted the gift. It was weightless, and yet, as she held it, she felt grounded, whole. "You will leave here," the keeper continued, "but this hour will not leave you. Whenever the world is too loud, hold this close, and the hush will return."
Oh.
Elya closed her fingers around the glass and pressed it gently to her chest. She bowed her head, and the keeper did the same, and then the room faded, not with a blink, but with the slow dimming of stars before dawn. Elya found herself standing once again beneath the silver-gray tree, the garden behind her, the breeze carrying quiet music through the leaves. She looked at the hourglass one last time before tucking it safely into the pouch with the bell. The sands within still rose slowly, never empty, never rushed. Let your breath become the stillness. Now, let your heartbeat echo the quiet ticking of time, not measured in minutes, but in meaning. You are holding your own hour, and in this hour, there is only rest. There is only peace. Sleep within it, and let the world turn softly around you. The wind had stilled as Elya stepped back onto the moss-lined path. Her fingers brushing the leaves that swayed like a farewell, the pouch at her side now held both the bell and the silver-rising hourglass. Resting beside one another as if they had always belonged together, she walked slowly, not out of weariness, but with the reverence one feels when leaving a sacred place. As she passed through the wooden arch once more, the garden behind her dimmed and not vanished, not lost, just softened into memory like a song whose final note lingers long after the melody has gone. The village rooftops peeked through the trees as she neared the edge of the grove. The morning had settled into its gentle rhythm. A baker's window opened, a dog padded sleepily down a lane. The world was awake. But Elya walked with the quiet of a dream still clinging to her shoulders, the kind of quiet that doesn't call attention to itself, but changes everything it touches at her cottage gate. She paused. She turned once more toward the grove, half expecting it to vanish behind her, but the arch remained, vines still curled around its sides, the feather symbol carved clear and soft in the wood. She smiled and stepped inside her home later, as the kettle warmed and steamed curled above her cup. She sat by the window with her journal. She did not write every detail, only what mattered: the feeling of the chime, the way time had turned in the keeper's hall, the softness of threads in the garden air on the windowsill beside her. The lavender-wrapped candle still waited, and she reached over and lit it just once. Its flame flickered gently, casting a golden dance across the wooden floor. But it was not the light she noticed most. It was the silence, a deep, contented silence, the kind that cradles thought, the kind that lets the heart breathe, the kind of silence that becomes a song. Elya sat still as the candle burned low, her eyes watching the flame without urgency. In her mind, she could hear the bell again, not ringing, not echoing, but present, a steady thread beneath all things. The villagers continued with their day. The fields were tilled, bread was baked, children chased each other beneath the shade of trees, and all the while, the bell remained silent, yet it was heard in the pause before laughter, in the hush before a story, in the moment someone closes their eyes and simply breathes. You too have heard it, though perhaps you didn't realize it has always been there. Let your breath return now to that place, the space between sound and silence, the moment where the world pauses and your spirit rests. There is no need to rush forward, no need to look back, only this breath, this heartbeat, this hushed sleep. Dear traveler, you've followed the bell well, and now the hush will follow you. The candle had burned to its final inch, the wick glowing a quiet amber before softening into rest. Elya watched the last flicker vanish, yet the warmth remained in the room, as though the flame had simply slipped beneath the surface of the wood, waiting for another moment to rise. She leaned back in her chair, her hands folded gently in her lap, the scent of lavender curling through the air like a lullaby remembered. The windows let in golden light. The world moved slowly, birds on fences, wind in the leaves, clouds shifting as if breathing. She let her gaze drift, but her mind did not wander. Instead, it softened, unfolded like fabric laid out in the sun. She thought of the bell again, not as an object now, but as a place within her, a stillness she could enter any time she wished, even with eyes open, even while stirring soup or brushing earth from her knees in the garden. It was there always, and it sounded not just when she was lost, but also when she was ready. She reached once more for her pouch. Inside, the bell rested beside the tiny hourglass, the silver grains still rising slowly, steadily. Patiently, she lifted it and held it near her ear. It didn't ring, it didn't hum, but she felt something. A warmth in her palms, a weight that said, "You're where you're meant to be." She returned it to the pouch and placed it carefully beneath her pillow, not for safekeeping but for dreaming. For in dreams, the bell traveled further. It found others gently without sound. A child in a faraway forest sat beside a stream and looked up suddenly. Heart still, a woman weaving in silence glanced toward the trees. Feeling watched by something kind, a boy tending sheep paused mid-step and tilted his head to the side. As if someone had whispered his name without words, the bell was calling not just Elya, not just when it called anyone who was quiet enough to hear, and it always had, even now. As you rest, you may feel it, a small thread pulling softly from inside your chest, asking nothing, promising only peace. Let your eyes fall gently closed. Let your hands rest where they are, held by still air and quiet warmth. You do not need to go anywhere, the hush is already here. You are part of it, the bell knows your breath. The candle remembers your name, and the story, this soft story, holds a space just for you. Sleep now, with no questions, no needing to return, only the flame that never leaves. As the afternoon light stretched across the fields, a hush settled gently over the village. Even the breeze moved more slowly. As if it too had heard something and paused to listen, Elya walked through the meadow beyond her garden, her fingers brushing the tall golden grass that swayed with each step. She wasn't going anywhere in particular. There was no task, no destination, only a feeling. That the bell was calling again, not from far away, but from within the path beneath her feet curved in a gentle spiral, and narrowing slowly until it led her to a low hill dotted with wild thyme and dandelions. At its crest stood something she had never seen before, yet somehow recognized immediately, a bell tower shorter than most, made not of stone or wood, but of woven branches and vines, strong as rope, shaped by careful hands. Long ago, the bell that hung within it was unlike her own. It was wide and deep, carved with the feather, the eye, the spiral awl, three joined in a single band around its middle. Its metal shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Though no light struck it directly, Elya stepped forward slowly, breath steady, hands at her sides. And the bell began to ring. No rope moved it. No wind touched it. But its tone was low, soft, and long, like a single note stretched into forever. It did not command. It invited. The sound wrapped around her like a blanket pulled up at twilight. She closed her eyes, and the world changed. She stood beneath a sky thick with stars. The tower still beside her. The bell still ringing, but now it sang alongside thousands of others. All around her, each one distant, each one unique. Their notes wove together in harmony, a song that stretched beyond time. A lullaby sung to the earth itself. She turned slowly and saw that she was not alone. Figures moved through the starlit meadow, some she knew, some she didn't. But all walked with the same softness, the same silence, the same light inside. Each one had heard their bell. Each one had followed the ringing, slowed, then stopped, not suddenly. Like a breath let go, the stars faded gently, the tower returned, and Elya stood once more on the hill. Hands folded at her chest, the bell no longer moved, but its shadow stretched long across the grass, not dark but glowing. A reminder that what had been heard could never be unheard. That once the bell's sound entered your heart, it became part of your story forever. She placed a hand on the wooden frame of the tower and whispered, "Thank you." And in the hush that followed, the grass swayed once more. The world resumed its gentle rhythm, and the bell's song lived on in her breath. Let your thoughts quiet now beneath the bell's shadow. Let its memory echo inside you. A gentle sound, a guiding light, a lullaby just for you. You are never far from its chime, and its silence will always hold you. As evening approached once more, Elya walked home from the bell tower hill, the soft hush of twilight returning like a beloved cloak. The sky shifted from warm amber to the soft lavender of dusk, and the first stars peeked through the thinning clouds. She held no map in her hands, but the path beneath her felt certain, as though her feet were following light instead of earth. When she returned to her cottage, she found the lavender candle still cool and still unburned again, but the scent lingered in the air, calming. It's familiar and layered with something new, something like stardust. She sat at her small table with her journal open and a fresh page waiting. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth. The ink in her pen flowed smoothly, as if it too remembered the bell. Tonight, instead of writing about her day, she drew not words, but symbols: the feather, the eye, the spiral. But they weren't scattered. She placed them carefully, thoughtfully, as if they formed landmarks, and then lines began to form between them. Curved lines, gentle arcs, paths. She didn't think about what she was drawing. She let her hand follow something quieter, something older. And when she paused, the page before her held a map, not of lands or roads, but of meaning. A map made of memories, of moments, of hushes and echoes. It glowed softly in the firelight. She realized it wasn't just hers. This map belonged to everyone who had heard the bell, everyone who had followed silence. She closed the journal gently and placed her hand on top of it. The warmth beneath her palm was steady. It's like a heartbeat, not hers, But the stories, then she stood and walked outside once more. The village had quieted, for the night windows flickered with soft light. A lullaby drifted from a mother's open window, the tune floating across rooftops like a whispered promise. Elya looked up at the stars, and for a moment, I seemed to reflect the map she had drawn. Each star a point, each one connected not by line, but by understanding somewhere out there. Another soul was drawing the same map, not with ink, but in their breath, their rest, their dreams. The bell rang again, inside her, not aloud, but in the silence between thoughts. That gentle pulse of recognition. She whispered to the stars, "I see the path," and the stars blinked in return. Let your breath settle now. Like ink on the final page, let your thoughts become landmarks on your own map. Each moment you've heard the hush, each time you've felt the pull toward quiet, they are your waypoints, and the bell is your compass. Sleep now, with the map unfolding behind your eyes, and the hush walking just ahead of you. Night had fully embraced the village now, wrapping rooftops and treetops in deep velvet shadow inside Elya's cottage. The fire had settled to a low amber glow. Breathing warmth into the quiet walls, she moved slowly, her steps soft across the wooden floor. As if the very house had begun to sleep, she reached for the pouch and brought it to her lap. The bell rested within, still as ever. And beside it, the hourglass continued its quiet rising grain by glowing grain. Steady and calm, she did not lift the bell this time. She only opened the pouch and looked even in silence. It felt alive, as if it saw her, and she wondered then, what if bells were not only instruments to ring, but memories made into shape? What if this one held all the steps she had taken? All the moments she had listened, chosen stillness, trusted a path no one else could see. She let her hands rest in her lap and let the thoughts settle into her chest like a soft, folded blanket. It was then she remembered a story once told to her by an old traveler in the market, that in some forgotten places, there were bells that remembered names, not the names others called you, but the one your spirit carried quietly, always that when the wind passed through these bells. They didn't make noise, they spoke your true name back to the stars. Elya didn't know if her bell was one of those, but somehow, tonight she felt it was. She closed her eyes and listened, not for sound, but for a memory. And slowly, gently it came, not a word, not a sound, just a feeling, the shape of her name in the hush. The sensation of being seen without having to speak. Tears didn't fall, but her breath deepened, and something inside her softened further. She leaned back into the chair, the firelight wrapping around her like a warm sigh outside. The leaves rustled like pages being turned, as if the world was ready to tell another story, but only when she was ready to listen. Again, she tucked the pouch beneath her pillow and stood one last time at the window. The stars blinked above, scattered like seeds across the dark. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered, "Thank you for calling me home." Then, with the bell safe beside her and the hush folded into her bones, Elya returned to bed. The quilt rose around her shoulders, the pillow cradled her head, and sleep came not as an escape, but as a return. Let your eyes drift closed now. Let your name, your quiet hidden name, be spoken softly by the wind. The bell remembers it, even if you've forgotten. It waits with no hurry, no judgment, only welcome sleep held in the memory of the bell, and the hush that called you here. Far from Elya's quiet room, under a sky stretched wide with silver clouds, the old bell-maker slept in his workshop. The tools on his table were still, the candles had long melted into wax puddles, and yet the room held its own kind of glow, kind that comes not from flame, but from memory. He dreamed as only bell-makers do, not of hammers or molten metal, not of fires or forges, but of the moments their bells are heard in his sleep. He walked a soft, endless hallway, lined with shelves of chimes. Each shelf bore the story of a single bell, not just who carried it, but when it had rung, why it had rung, and what silence had followed. After, he passed one with carvings of oak leaves, another with the symbol of rain etched into its side. One had a single red thread tied around its clapper. He paused at that one and touched it gently. It rang in his dream, a clear, single tone, the kind that vibrates through the chest more than the air, and in that ring he saw her again, the girl who had walked beneath trees and listened instead of questioned. He saw the library, the glowing stone, the guardian's gaze, and he smiled in his sleep because he knew. The bell had been received. He had not chosen wrongly. He continued down the hall, each step soft against the wooden floor that had never needed nails. It was made of lullabies and patience in the distance. He saw a small door, barely taller than his chest. He opened it and stepped inside. It was a child's room, but not from this age. Simple tools hung on the wall. Bundles of dried herbs tied with ribbon rested near a small bed, and on the nightstand a bell. It was not yet spoken for, its metal unfinished, its story still waiting. He stepped forward, placed a finger on it, and whispered a name he didn't recognize, but knew he would remember. That's how the bell maker's magic worked. Not in spells or sparks, but in the deep listening, in choosing not who should hear the bell, but who was already listening for it. He turned and left the room, the door closing with a hush behind him back in the waking world. The wind shifted outside his shop. One of the bells on the wall rang softly just once, and though his eyes remained closed, a smile passed gently across the old man's face. The next bell was ready. Let yourself rest in his dream. Now feel the hush of the hallway, the warmth of the shelves, the quiet ringing of things that have not yet happened. You too may be part of a story waiting to be cast. Melted, shaped, held, and heard, sleep inside that knowing, that quiet, certain hum of being chosen by the silence. The moon was full and low in the sky, its light stretching across fields and rooftops, like the hem of a sleeping gown in Elya's room. The hush was deep now. Even the candle wick, long since cooled, seemed to breathe in time with her rest, and yet, somewhere within her dream, something stirred, not urgent, not loud, just a thread, glowing gently in the dark, drifting before her as if beckoning one step more. She followed it without question in the dream. She walked through spaces she did not recognize, but did not fear. Old halls of stone where moss grew between every tile, a forest where every leaf shimmered silver, as if dipped in starlight, a bridge that arched across a lake of still water that reflected only the stars, not the sky, and at the edge of everything, the thread wound upward into the clouds. She looked at it and paused, feeling its tug on her chest. Not demanding, just reminding. She reached out and wrapped it gently around her wrist. Beside the faint golden thread still tied from the garden, the two shimmered together for a moment, then merged into one. And suddenly, she understood. It had never been just one bell or one path or one thread. They were all part of something larger, woven into one great hush, a listening that spanned every place. Every time, in each soul who had ever paused in the quiet, each person who had ever tilted their head toward an invisible sound, had helped shape this great tapestry of silence. She was not alone on her journey. She had never been, even in her earliest steps, when she thought she was wandering. Even in the stillest moments, she had been connected. To the bell maker, to the guardian, to the child yet to hear their first chime, to the old woman who once carried a bell until her last breath. All threads, all part of the same gentle, eternal story. The wind in the dream picked up slightly, and the thread began to unwind from her wrist, not leaving her. But releasing itself into the air like smoke made of light. She watched it rise, curling upward into the stars. And as it vanished, she smiled, for she knew now the thread wasn't what connected her to the bell. It was what the bell had awakened within her, the part that listened, the part that waited, the part that remembered. Let your breath match the rhythm of the thread now. Inhale like lifting, exhale like letting go. Feel the hush that wraps all stories together, the gentle weave of memory, rest and return. You are part of it. You always have been. Sleep within its folds tonight. The thread will carry you gently through the dark and into the quiet light beyond. The stars shimmered like ancient memories across the night sky as Elya stirred beneath her quilt, the hush of the world resting like silk over her skin. Her breath moved slowly, as if echoing the gentle pulse of the bell she had once followed, long before she even knew it had been calling her. Outside her cottage, the village lay wrapped in shadow and moonlight, still and safe. Every shutter was closed, every lantern out, and yet a soft glow seemed to linger, not from flame or fire, but from peace. a kind of light that only comes when every story has settled into its last page. And in that light, Elya opened her eyes. She did not rise with urgency. There was no pull this time, no whisper of mystery tugging her forward, only stillness. She felt something deep within understanding, quiet and complete. The journey was no longer calling her outward. It was now something she carried inward. She sat at the edge of her bed and looked down at the pouch. It had grown worn around the edges, softened by travel and tucked moments. Her fingers curled around it gently, lifting it with reverence. Inside, the bell still rested, silent, whole, and beside it, the hourglass, whose silver grains had long stopped rising. Not because time had run out, but because time had stilled. Balanced, held, Elya stepped outside. Barefoot once more, the earth cooled beneath her feet. The fields whispered in the breeze. A lone owl called from a distant tree, and above, the stars seemed to be leaning closer, listening. She walked slowly to the same old tree near the start of her journey. It's the one where the first strange leaf had fallen into her path. She knelt at its base and closed her eyes. What she saw was not a vision, but a memory held in stillness, the bell ringing only once at twilight. The library hidden beneath the roots of the earth. The garden where forgotten songs bloomed. The silver-threaded map drawn by instinct. The tower that sang with otherworldly harmony. In the bell-maker's dream, the place where bells chose their listeners. Each one returned like a soft wave brushing the shore. Elya breathed in deeply, her hand resting gently on her chest, where the bell's hush had always lived. Then something changed. A wind began to rise, not fierce, but purposeful. From the east, through the tall grass, came a child. A boy, no older than 10, wearing a satchel stitched with stars. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but wonder. He looked at Elya, and without speaking, he sat beside her. And soon, from the west, came another woman with hair the color of ash and eyes like candlelight. She carried a bundle of herbs and a worn book with no words on its cover. From every corner more arrived. An old man with a walking stick wrapped in ivy, a girl with painted bells hanging from her belt, a stranger cloaked in wind, face hidden but presence warm. One by one they came and sat quietly around the great tree, as if answering a call none had spoken aloud. Elya looked at them all not with surprise, but knowing the bell's last echo had not called her. It had called them, and this was her part now, not to follow, but to welcome. She reached into her pouch and removed the bell. Holding it with both hands, she stood. Its metal caught the moonlight and shimmered, not with sound, but with memory. And then, with a gentle motion, she passed it to the child beside her. He accepted it with awe, as if receiving something sacred. The bell did not ring. It pulsed. Once, softly, then still. The boy looked at her, uncertain. Elya smiled. "You'll know when to listen," she whispered. "Let your breath match the rhythm of this moment. Feel the stillness pass from one soul to another. A story does not end when the bell falls silent, continues in the one who holds it next. You too may one day feel something stir a hush deep within your chest, and when it comes, do not fear it." That is how the next story begins. The child who now held the bell stared at it quietly, not in confusion, but as if listening inward, waiting to hear a sound not made for the ears. Around him, the others remained seated, peaceful, breathing as one, as if the hush had moved into them all. Elya sat once more beneath the tree. She watched not as a guide nor as a guardian, but simply as one who had walked the path before. The bell had moved on. Her thread had gently unwound from the larger weave. And now a new thread had begun to shimmer into place. The moment stretched gently across the meadow, golden and deep. No one spoke. No one stirred. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the world had paused to witness this passing. From somewhere unseen came the low echo of a different bell knot, loud, not near, but present. It rang just once. Then silence again. And yet, in that moment, Elya felt Eton understanding, pure and weightless. The hush did not belong to her. It never had. She had simply tended to it for a time. Like a lantern passed hand to hand, each bearer giving light until another was ready to carry it forward. The feather, the spiral, the eye. They were not symbols of mystery anymore. They were reminders. The feather, gentleness, the art of soft steps. The spiral, journey not in circles but in growth. The eye, not to see outward but to see within. Out. The child looked at her again, not asking for direction, but thanking her. And with that glance, Elya felt something release from her shoulders, not weight, but a breath she hadn't known she was still holding. She stood and walked to the edge of the group. Her hands rested at her sides. The grass moved around her legs in a soft, slow dance. She did not need to stay. The story had moved on. As she stepped away from the tree, the stars above shifted gently, not in shape, but in shimmer. One by one they brightened, then softened again, as though nodding. She passed the archway she had once entered through, the one woven with ivy. This time she did not step through. She placed her hand on the side, fingers brushing the carved feather, and whispered something no one heard. And still the hush grew deeper. With each step through the meadow, the path behind her grew quiet, then softer, then gone. She walked not toward a destination, but into stillness itself. The kind that welcomes, not hides. The kind that holds, not ends. Somewhere in the village, a newborn stirred in sleep, smiled, and rested again. A woman watching the stars from her porch felt her eyes grow heavy. An old man who had once heard the bell long ago sat up in bed and whispered, "She has passed the hush." And so she had, not into shadow, not into vanishing, but into the very hush itself. She did not become legend. She became the pause between the notes, the space between the stories, the keeper of quiet. And from that moment on, whenever a traveler followed a bell's soft ring, whenever someone paused to feel the silence in their chest, they would find her not as a figure, not as a memory, but as part of the hush itself. She had become the whisper that reminded you to listen. Let your eyes close gently now.
Now may let.
Let the weight of her story settle like soft petals across your chest. You are not alone. You are never alone. The hush is already around you. It has always been. And now, a part of it carries the gentle presence of one who walked the path and became stillness. Sleep within that stillness. Let her story fold around you like a second quilt. And know with your next breath, you are already home. In the heart of the village, inside the quiet cottage where Elya once slept. The lavender candle still stood upon the windowsill. Its wick had not burned for some time, and yet the scent remained in the air, gentle, sweet and soft like the edge of a dream. Outside, the villagers began to stir with the first light of dawn. A baker opened his shutters to let in the morning breeze. A mother hummed softly as she braided her child's hair. The world continued, unaware that something sacred had shifted in the hush of night. Yet some knew. The boy who now carried the bell awoke with a feeling he could not name. He had not dreamed in the way children often do, but had instead rested inside a silence so deep it had spoken without speaking. He rose slowly, the bell still held close against his chest. The others who had gathered the night before began to rise too, one by one. They did not speak. Words felt too sharp for a morning like this. Instead, they moved with care, their hearts holding the same breath. The old woman laid out bundles of herbs beside the roots of the great tree. The man with the avirap staff placed it gently on the grass and knelt beside it. The girl with painted bells tied one of them to a low branch with a strand of her own hair. And the boy, standing in the center, looked up at the tree that had once cradled Elya's beginning. He closed his eyes and listened. No sound came, but he heard it, the hush. It wasn't around him now. It was within. Later, he would return to the village. He would walk the path she once walked, enter the library she once discovered, pass through the spiral garden of threads. But not today. Today was not for beginning. It was for becoming. He sat cross-legged beneath the tree, holding the bell in both hands. The others formed a circle around him, not as witnesses, but as keepers. And then he raised the bell to his lips and whispered not a ring, but a promise. I will carry this, not for power, not for glory, but for listening. The bell did not chime. It pulsed once in his hands, warm and certain. The hush passed through them, all like a shared breath. like candlelight passed between still hands. And in a cottage on the edge of the field, the lavender candles sparked to life without a match. Its flame glowed golden, then violet, then steady white. No one lit it. No one needed to. The story was still being told. You two are part of this. Though you rest now with your eyes closed and your breath soft, the hush wraps around you just the same. You may never hold the bell in your hand. You may never step beneath the ancient oak. But when you choose silence, when you choose stillness, when you feel peace ripple across your skin like wind through wheat, you are answering it. And in that moment, the candle lights, the hush speaks, and the bell remembers your name. Let yourself rest in that knowing. There is no path you must take, no journey you must prove. Only breath, only softness, only the space to return to who you've always been beneath the noise sleep. And let the hush guide you now. The candle never burns out. Because it was never made of wax. It was made of story, and it burns in you. The hush was everywhere now, not a silence born from emptiness, but from fullness. A rich, deep quiet that held all the voices that had come before. All the steps walked upon forest paths, all the dreams dreamt beneath stars and stories. It was not the end of something, but the space where all things returned. In the meadow, the boy sat with the bell still in his hands, but it was no longer a thing he carried. It was a part of him. The circle around him had gently broken apart, not because their time had ended, but because they were ready to walk on, each carrying their thread in a new direction. Some would return to the village, their lives forever softer. Some would travel beyond the hills, seeking others who had forgotten the hush. Some would simply rest, becoming still keepers in quiet places. The bell had spoken its name to them, all not through sound, but through stillness. Back at the cottage, the lavender candle burned steadily. Its flame never flickered, not even in the breeze that passed through the open window. The scent of lavender wove through the air like memory, like comfort, like a promise never broken. Inside, a fresh page had opened in Elya's journal. No hand had touched it, yet upon it, 3 symbols shimmered faintly in silver ink: the feather, the eye, the spiral. Beneath them, a final message, as soft as breath: listen gently, and you will find the road. That was how it always began, not with directions, not with urgency, but with a feeling like standing at the edge of something vast and remembering you are not small, only still. Somewhere far away, a child pressed their ear to their pillow and heard something soft, a bell, a whisper, a hush. They weren't sure, but they smiled in their sleep. Elsewhere, an old woman paused on a walk she'd taken every morning for 40 years, and for no reason at all, turned her face to the wind and whispered, "Thank you." And farther still, in a quiet room with curtains pulled wide, someone who had never believed in magic closed their eyes and felt a warmth pressed gently against their heart. They didn't move, they didn't speak, they only listened, and the hush filled the space between their thoughts. This is the gift of the bell, not to be loud, not to lead, but to remember for you, until you are ready to remember for yourself. You, dear listener, have walked this story to its end. But endings are never truly the final note. They are the gentle hush before the next song begins. Let your breath be soft now. Let your thoughts drift like feathers into the sky. Let your story rest beside Elya's, tucked into the folds of the hush that echoes forever. You do not need to search anymore. You are already home, and the bell will always be there, not waiting, just listening, just ready. Sleep now. Let the hush cradle your name one last time. Let this story rest with you in peace, in stillness, in light,